He brought his pregnant boss to dinner and said I would be the nanny while she brought the money. What satisfying satisfaction you're waiting for? It came at that very table. But the truth she whispered changed everything in ways I never expected.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
The restaurant was Bellini's, the Italian place on Providence Road where Dennis and I had celebrated our 30th anniversary 2 years ago. White tablecloths, candles in crystal holders, a sommelier who remembered our names. I'd thought we were meeting his new CEO to discuss a charity event. That's what he'd told me. Victoria Lawson walked in wearing a red maternity dress that cost more than my first car. 6 months pregnant, glowing, confident. She moved through the restaurant like she owned it. Maybe she thought she did. Patricia. She extended her hand. Her nails were perfect. Her smile was practiced. I've heard so much about you. I shook her hand. Noticed the way Dennis pulled out her chair, the way his hand lingered on her shoulder, the way he didn't look at me. 32 years of marriage. I knew that look. I'd just never seen it directed at someone else. Dennis tells me you used to work in accounting, Victoria said, settling into her seat. Before you retired. I was a CPA for 23 years. How nice. Numbers. Very practical. The way she said it. Practical. Like it was a disease. Like being good with numbers was something to be pitied. I smiled and said nothing. We ordered. Dennis chose the wine without asking me. He'd never done that before. Victoria talked about the company, Coleman Industries, the business Dennis had started in our garage 30 years ago, the business I had kept alive through 3 near bankruptcies and 2 recessions. We're expanding into healthcare technology, Victoria said. It's a $4.2 billion market opportunity. Dennis has been instrumental in the strategy. Dennis beamed. He actually beamed, like a child being praised by a teacher. The entrees arrived. Victoria cut her salmon into precise, tiny pieces. Dennis watched her do it like it was fascinating. I pushed my pasta around my plate and waited. I'd been waiting for 6 months, since Dennis started coming home late, since his phone started buzzing at odd hours, since he stopped reaching for me in bed. I'd hired a private investigator in March. I'd seen the photos. I knew about the apartment in South End, the weekend trips to Asheville, the jewelry purchases he'd hidden from our joint accounts. I knew, but I'd waited. Patricia, Dennis said, finally looking at me. Victoria and I have something to tell you. Here it comes, I thought. The speech. The, we've grown apart, and it's not your fault, and I hope we can be civil about this. I'm in love with Victoria. We're going to be a family. I set down my fork. The baby is mine, Dennis continued. We've known for a few months. We wanted to wait until what? Until we had a plan. A plan? Victoria leaned forward. Her perfume was expensive. Gardenia and something darker underneath. Patricia, I know this is difficult. But Dennis and I have discussed it, and we think the transition can be smooth. For everyone. Transition. You'll keep the house, of course. We'll be generous with the settlement. And... She paused, glancing at Dennis like they'd rehearsed this part. We'd like you to consider staying on, in a different capacity. I waited. As the nanny, Dennis said. When the baby comes. You've always been good with children. Brandon turned out well, and Victoria will be busy with the company, and I'll be the nanny. It's a good arrangement. You'd have purpose, income. You'd still be part of the family, in a way. I looked at my husband. This man I'd built a life with. This man whose business I'd saved with my father's inheritance when we were 28. This man who had signed over 51% of Coleman Industries to me as collateral for that loan. Collateral he'd apparently forgotten about. I looked at Victoria. This woman who thought she was taking everything from me. This woman who had no idea what she was sitting across from. I have something for you, I said. I reached into my purse. Dennis flinched. For a moment, I think he expected a gun. Instead, I pulled out a manila folder. The same folder I'd been carrying for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. I slid it across the table to Victoria. Dennis laughed. Actually laughed. What is this? Divorce papers? Patricia, I appreciate the drama, but... Open it, I said to Victoria. Page 7. Victoria's smirk faltered. She opened the folder, flipped through the pages. Corporate bylaws. shareholder agreements, documents from 1998, yellowed at the edges but perfectly legal. She reached page 7. I watched her face change. The confidence drained out of it like water from a bathtub. Her hands started to shake. The document trembled in her grip. "This can't be," she whispered. "What?" Dennis grabbed the papers. "What is it?" Victoria didn't answer. She was staring at me, really seeing me for the first time. "Patricia Coleman," I said calmly, 51% silent partner, majority shareholder of Coleman Industries since March 15, 1998, the day I saved your company from bankruptcy with my father's $200,000 inheritance. Dennis's face went white. You said that was a gift." "I said it was an investment. You were too proud to take a loan from your wife, so I took a share of the company instead. Your lawyer drew up the papers. Helen Morris. You remember Helen. But I would have known. You signed them, Dennis. Page 12. Your signature. Witnessed and notarized." Dennis flipped to page 12. His signature stared back at him. The color drained from his face until he looked like a man made of paper. Victoria's wine glass slipped from her fingers. Merlot spread across the white tablecloth like a bloodstain. She didn't seem to notice. "There's something else," Victoria said. Her voice was barely a whisper. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at Dennis. "Something I should have told you." "What?" "The baby." Victoria's hands went to her stomach. "It's not yours." Dennis stared at her. "It's Marcus's. Marcus Webb, the founder. He and I, before he died." Dennis fell out of his chair. Literally fell. One moment he was sitting. The next he was on the floor of Bellini's, surrounded by broken wine glass and white tablecloth, staring up at the ceiling like a man who'd just discovered the sky was falling. I stood up, straightened my napkin, looked down at my husband. "I'll be in touch," I said. "Through my lawyer." I walked out of the restaurant. Behind me, I heard Victoria calling for help, heard the waiter rushing over, heard Dennis making sounds that might have been words but sounded more like an animal dying. I didn't look back. Outside, the Charlotte night was warm and soft. I stood on the sidewalk and breathed in the summer air. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt nothing but a cold, quiet satisfaction. 32 years. 3 decades of building something together. And in one dinner, I'd watched it all burn down. But here's the thing about fire. Sometimes you have to burn the old growth to make room for something new. I called Helen from the parking lot. "It's done," I said. "He knows." "How did he take it?" He fell out of his chair. Helen laughed. I wish I could have seen it. "There's a complication. The CEO, Victoria, she's pregnant." "I know. I've been doing some digging. The baby isn't Dennis's." She told him. Tonight, at the table. Interesting timing. She didn't know about me, about the shares. She was as surprised as he was. Helen was quiet for a moment. "Patricia, there's something else you should know. About Victoria. About Marcus Webb." "What?" "I'll tell you tomorrow. In person. It's not the kind of thing you say over the phone." I drove home alone. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. The same house where Dennis and I had raised Brandon. The same house where I'd spent 32 years being a wife, a mother, a silent partner in every sense of the word. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the back porch, looking at the garden I'd planted 20 years ago. The roses were blooming. The hydrangeas were blue this year. I'd added aluminum sulfate to the soil. Funny. The things you think about when your life falls apart. I thought about Dennis, about the man he used to be, about the man he'd become. I thought about Victoria, about the baby, about Marcus Webb, who'd died of a heart attack 6 months ago, leaving no heirs. Or so everyone thought. I thought about what Helen wanted to tell me, what she'd discovered about Victoria, what new complication was waiting around the corner, and I thought about the company, Coleman Industries, my company, whether Dennis wanted to admit it or not. The company I'd saved 3 times. The company that bore his name but ran on my money. Tomorrow, I would walk into that building as what I'd always been, the majority shareholder. Tomorrow, everything would be different. But tonight, I sat in my garden and watched the fireflies dance, and I let myself feel something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Helen's office was on the 14th floor of the Morrison building, in a corner suite with windows overlooking the Charlotte skyline. I'd been there 100 times over the years, for estate planning, for business advice, for the quiet counsel that old friends provide. This time felt different. "Coffee?" Helen asked, already pouring 2 cups from the carafe on her desk. "Please." She handed me a cup and sat down across from me. Helen Morris was 63, silver-haired, sharp-eyed. We'd been friends since law school. She'd gone into corporate law. I'd gone into accounting. And somehow we'd stayed close through 3 decades of marriages, children, and the slow accumulation of secrets. "You look tired," she said. "I didn't sleep much." "I imagine not." She took a sip of her coffee. "Dennis called me this morning. 4 times. I didn't answer." "What did he want?" "To contest the shareholder agreement, to claim he was coerced, to threaten a lawsuit." She smiled. "The usual." "Can he do anything?" "The documents are ironclad. I made sure of that 30 years ago." She paused. "Patricia, there's something else. Something I found out about Victoria, about Marcus Webb." I set down my cup. "Tell me." Helen opened a folder on her desk. Inside were photographs, documents, bank statements. She spread them out like a dealer laying cards. Marcus Webb died 6 months ago. Heart attack, official cause of death. He was the founder of Webb Technologies, which Coleman Industries acquired 2 years ago. The acquisition made Dennis rich. It also brought Victoria into the company. I know all this. What you don't know is that Victoria and Marcus were more than colleagues. They were lovers for 3 years. And when Marcus died, he left everything to her. Everything? His shares in Webb Technologies, his personal assets, his house in Asheville. Helen paused. "But there's a catch. Marcus had a son he never acknowledged, a son whose mother was paid off 30 years ago to disappear." I stared at her. And that son is now 32 years old. He's a lawyer in Raleigh. His name is Daniel Webb. And he's been quietly gathering evidence that Marcus's will was fraudulently altered. Altered by whom? Helen looked at me. Victoria. The weight of it settled over me. Victoria Lawson, pregnant with Marcus's child, inheriting his fortune, sleeping with my husband. And now possibly a forger. Does Daniel know about the baby? Not yet. But when he finds out, when a DNA test proves that Victoria's child is Marcus's biological heir, everything changes. The will contest becomes a custody battle. The inheritance becomes a legal nightmare. And Victoria? Victoria is about to discover that the empire she built is made of sand. I sat back in my chair. I thought about the woman in the red dress at Bellini's. The confidence, the calculation, the way she'd looked at me like I was already defeated. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Nothing yet. But I think you should meet Daniel, hear his story, understand what we're dealing with." "Why?" Helen smiled. "Because, Patricia, you own 51% of Coleman Industries. And Coleman Industries owns 40% of what used to be Webb Technologies. Whatever happens to Victoria's inheritance affects your company too. My company. Yes, your company. The one your husband forgot about. The one that's about to become very valuable or very complicated." I drove home slowly. The Charlotte traffic was light for a Wednesday afternoon, but I wasn't in a hurry. I needed to think. 32 years of marriage. I'd thought I knew my husband. I'd thought I knew my life. But everything I'd believed was built on foundations I hadn't examined. Dennis's ambition, his pride, his willingness to sign away control of his own company rather than admit he needed help. And now, Victoria, a woman I'd met once at a dinner meant to humiliate me. A woman carrying a dead man's child. A woman who thought she was winning. My phone buzzed. A text from Brandon, my son. "Mom, call me. Dad's been calling all day. He's losing it." I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment. The house looked the same as always. Red brick, white shutters, the garden I'd planted 20 years ago. But nothing was the same. Nothing would ever be the same again. I called Brandon. "Mom." He sounded relieved. "What's going on?" "Dad called me at work. He was crying. He said you're taking the company." "I'm not taking anything. I already own it." "What?" "It's complicated, Brandon, but your father and I are getting divorced. And the company, Coleman Industries, I've owned the majority share since before you were born." Silence on the line. "Brandon?" I knew something was wrong. I knew it for months. The way Dad was acting, the late nights, the business trips that didn't make sense. He paused. He was cheating, wasn't he? Yes. With who? Victoria Lawson, his CEO. Jesus. Another pause. "Mom, I'm sorry." "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just come to dinner on Sunday. We need to talk. As a family." "Okay, Sunday." I hung up and went inside. The house was quiet, clean, everything in its place. I'd spent 30 years making this house a home, and now it felt like a museum, a monument to a marriage that had been dead for years. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the living room. The divorce papers Helen had prepared were on the coffee table. I'd sign them tomorrow. Then the lawyers would do their work, and in 6 months, I'd be free. But freedom was just the beginning. I thought about Daniel Webb, about Victoria, about the baby that wasn't Dennis's, about the web of lies and secrets that connected us all. Tomorrow, I would meet Daniel. I would hear his story. I would understand what I was dealing with, and then I would decide what to do. The phone rang. Dennis. I let it go to voicemail. "Patricia, please, we need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. The documents, I didn't know. I never meant—" His voice broke. He was crying. I deleted the message without listening to the rest. Daniel Webb had his father's eyes. I noticed that the moment he walked into the coffee shop, the same deep blue, the same intensity. But where Marcus Webb had been confident to the point of arrogance, Daniel was cautious, guarded, like a man who'd learned early that the world wasn't fair. "Mrs. Coleman?" He extended his hand. "I'm Daniel." "Patricia, please." We sat at a corner table, away from the windows. Daniel ordered black coffee. I ordered tea. We looked at each other like strangers at a party, trying to figure out what we had in common. "Helen told you about my father," Daniel said. It wasn't a question. "She told me he left everything to Victoria, and that you believe the will was altered. I don't believe it." "I know it." He pulled a folder from his briefcase. "These are the original documents. The will my father signed 6 months before he died. In this version, I inherit everything. His shares, his assets, his house. Victoria gets nothing." I looked at the documents. They seemed authentic. The signature looked like the ones I'd seen on business contracts. "How did you get these?" "My father's assistant, Margaret Chen. She kept copies of everything. When the new will surfaced after his death, the one leaving everything to Victoria, Margaret came to me. Why didn't she go to the police? Because Margaret is 73 years old and depends on her pension. Because Victoria has lawyers who could destroy her. Because in this country, the truth doesn't matter as much as who can afford to fight for it. I understood that. I'd lived it for 30 years. "What do you want from me, Daniel?" He leaned forward. "I want justice. My father was murdered. The word hung in the air between us." Murdered. The official report said heart attack. The official report was wrong. My father was 58 years old. Perfect health. He ran marathons. He'd had a physical 2 weeks before he died. Clean bill of health. Daniel's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "Victoria was with him that night, at his house in Asheville. She called 911 at 3 a.m. By the time the paramedics arrived, he was dead. That doesn't prove anything. But this might." He pulled another document from his folder. Toxicology report. My father had elevated levels of digoxin in his blood. Digoxin is a heart medication. My father wasn't on any heart medication. I stared at the report. The numbers meant nothing to me, but the implication was clear. You think Victoria poisoned him. I think Victoria found out she was pregnant. I think she told my father. I think he was going to change his will, legitimize the child, give her a portion of the estate. But Victoria wanted more. She wanted everything, so she killed him and forged a new will and inherited a fortune. Daniel's eyes were burning. And now she's sleeping with your husband, running your company, carrying my father's child, a child she's claiming is your husband's. She told Dennis the truth last night at the restaurant. Daniel blinked. She told him the baby isn't his? Yes. After I revealed my shareholder agreement. I think she panicked. That doesn't make sense. Why would she? He stopped, thought about it. Unless she's planning something else. Unless Dennis was just a stepping stone. A stepping stone to what? Coleman Industries, your company. It owns 40% of Webb Technologies. If Victoria controls Coleman, she controls both companies. She'd be untouchable. The pieces started falling into place. Victoria hadn't seduced Dennis for love. She'd seduced him for access, for power, for the company he thought he owned but didn't. But I own the majority share, I said, not Dennis. She didn't know that. Nobody knew that. Dennis didn't even know that. Daniel smiled grimly. You just destroyed her entire plan with a 30-year-old contract. What do you want to do? I want to expose her. I want to prove she forged the will. I want to prove she killed my father. And I want my inheritance back. How? I need access to Coleman Industries. To the financial records from the Webb Technologies acquisition. There are discrepancies, payments that don't make sense, accounts that shouldn't exist. If I can follow the money, I can find the proof. You want me to let you into my company. I want you to help me take down the woman who's been sleeping with your husband. I thought about Victoria, about the red dress, about the way she'd looked at me, about the words she'd used. Practical, like it was something to be ashamed of. I'll talk to Helen, I said. We'll set up a meeting. But Daniel, if you're wrong about this, if Victoria is innocent, she's not innocent. My father is dead because of her, and if we don't stop her, she'll destroy your company too. I drove home with my head spinning. Murder, forgery, a dead man's child, a 30-year-old shareholder agreement, my husband's tears. The world I'd known was gone. In its place was something darker, more dangerous, a game I'd never asked to play. But I was playing now, whether I wanted to or not. Helen called that evening. I've seen Daniel's evidence. It's compelling. Not conclusive, but compelling. Do you believe him? I believe he believes it. Whether that's enough. She paused. Patricia, there's something else. Victoria's lawyer called me today. She wants to meet with you. Why? She didn't say, but she was insistent. She said it was urgent. I'm not meeting with her alone. Of course not. I'll be there. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., my office. I hung up and poured myself a glass of wine. My third of the day. I'd never been a heavy drinker, but the last 48 hours had changed things. Dennis called again. I didn't answer. Then a text. Patricia, please. I made a mistake. I love you. I've always loved you. I deleted it. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I turned on the television for noise, but the sounds didn't reach me. I was thinking about Victoria, about what she wanted, about what she was planning. She'd lost Dennis. She'd lost the company. She'd lost everything she thought she had. Women like Victoria didn't accept defeat. They found another angle, another weakness to exploit. What was mine? I made a list in my head. My son Brandon, but he was on my side. My shareholder agreement, ironclad. My reputation, spotless. Then I thought of something else. Something Helen had mentioned in passing. The baby. Marcus Webb's child. A child who would be heir to the Webb fortune. A child who was currently growing inside Victoria Lawson's body. If Daniel was right, if Victoria had killed Marcus and forged his will, then that baby was the key to everything. DNA evidence, inheritance claims, custody battles. Victoria knew this. Of course she knew. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't about negotiation. It was about leverage. And suddenly, I understood what she wanted. She wanted to sell me the baby. Victoria arrived at Helen's office exactly at 2 p.m. She was wearing black, a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. No red this time. This was a different Victoria. Subdued. Careful. Patricia. She nodded at me. Thank you for meeting. I'm not sure I had a choice. Helen gestured to the chairs across from her desk. Please sit. Can I offer you water? Coffee? Water would be fine. We sat. Helen poured water into crystal glasses. The silence was heavy, thick with everything that wasn't being said. I'll get to the point, Victoria said. I know about Daniel Webb. I kept my face neutral. Who? Marcus's son, the one who's been telling people I forged his father's will. Victoria's smile was thin. I know you met with him yesterday. I know what he told you. How do you know that? Because I've been watching him for months. Because I knew he'd come after me eventually. And because... She paused. I need your help. I almost laughed. My help? You came to my anniversary dinner to tell me you were stealing my husband and my company. And now you want my help? The situation has changed. Yes. You discovered I own 51% of the company you thought you were stealing. Victoria flinched. Just slightly. I deserved that. You deserve worse. Helen cleared her throat. Perhaps we should hear what Victoria has to say. Victoria took a breath. Composed herself. Daniel Webb believes I killed his father. He's wrong. Marcus died of a heart attack. Natural causes. The toxicology report he's showing people. It's been altered. Why would Daniel alter a toxicology report? Because he's been trying to destroy me for 2 years. Since before Marcus died. Victoria's voice hardened. Daniel isn't the victim in this story, Patricia. He's the threat. Explain. Daniel Webb was estranged from his father. They hadn't spoken in 5 years. Marcus cut him out of his life, and his will, because Daniel was stealing from him, embezzling money from Webb Technologies through shell companies. That's convenient. It's documented. Marcus confronted Daniel 3 weeks before he died, told him he was going to press charges, and then, Victoria spread her hands. Marcus had a heart attack. You're saying Daniel killed his own father? I'm saying the timing is suspicious. I'm saying Daniel had motive. I'm saying the toxicology report was clean until Daniel started claiming otherwise. Victoria leaned forward. Patricia, I'm not a good person. I know that. I seduced your husband because I thought it would help me control the company. I was wrong about who really owned it. And I was wrong about what kind of man Dennis was. What kind of man is he? Weak, vain, easy to manipulate. Victoria shrugged. I needed access to the financial records. I needed to understand how the Webb acquisition worked. Dennis was a means to an end. And the baby? Was that a means to an end too? Victoria's hand went to her stomach. For a moment, something real flickered across her face. Something vulnerable. The baby wasn't planned. Marcus and we were careful. But accidents happen. She looked at me. I loved him, Patricia. I know you don't believe that. But I loved him. Then why did you tell Dennis the baby was his? Because Marcus was dead. Because I was alone. Because I needed protection. Victoria's voice cracked. Daniel has been following me. Threatening me. He told me if I didn't give him the Webb shares, he would destroy me. So I found someone who could protect me. Dennis, yes. I thought about what she was saying. 2 different stories. 2 different villains. Daniel, the bereaved son, seeking justice. Daniel, the embezzler, seeking revenge. Why should I believe you over him? Because I have proof. Victoria opened her purse and pulled out a USB drive. These are the real financial records. The ones Daniel doesn't want anyone to see. Bank accounts in his name. Wire transfers from Webb Technologies. 3 years of theft, all documented. She set the drive on the desk. Give this to the FBI. Let them investigate. Let them find the truth. Victoria stood up. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Patricia. I'm asking you to protect the company. Your company. Because if Daniel gets control of the Webb shares, he'll destroy everything your husband built. Everything I built, I corrected. Yes. Everything you built. She walked to the door, paused, turned back. One more thing. The baby. I know you hate me. But this child, Marcus's child, is innocent. Whatever happens between us, please remember that. She left. Helen and I sat in silence for a long moment. "Do you believe her?" I finally asked. "I don't know." Helen picked up the USB drive. "But this is easy enough to verify. I have forensic accountants who can analyze these records. If Victoria is telling the truth, we'll know within a week. And if Daniel is telling the truth, then we have a bigger problem." Helen looked at me. "Patricia, one of them is lying. And whoever is lying has already committed crimes. Forgery at minimum. Possibly murder. How do I know which one to trust?" "You don't. Not yet." Helen smiled grimly. "But here's the thing about liars. They always make mistakes. They always leave traces. We just have to find them." I drove home in a daze. Daniel or Victoria? Victoria or Daniel? Both of them claiming to be victims. Both of them pointing fingers at each other. Both of them wanting something from me. Dennis was waiting on my doorstep. He looked terrible. Unshaven, red-eyed, wearing yesterday's clothes. He stood up when I pulled into the driveway. "Patricia, please, just 5 minutes. I don't have anything to say to you. Then just listen. Please." I could have gone inside. I could have called the police. Instead, I stood in my own driveway and let my husband of 32 years beg. "I made a mistake," he said. "The worst mistake of my life. Victoria, she told me things, made me feel things. But it was all a lie. She was using me. To get to the company. To get to you. I know." "You know? I met with her today. She told me everything." Dennis's face went pale. "What did she tell you?" "That you were weak. That you were easy to manipulate. That she never loved you. She loved Marcus Webb." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "The baby isn't yours, Dennis. You know that now. You were just a tool. A stepping stone. A means to an end. Patricia, you threw away 32 years of marriage for a woman who was using you. You tried to make me the nanny to another man's child. You tried to steal my company. The company I saved. The company I built. The company that bears your name but runs on my money. I didn't know about the shares. I swear I didn't know. Because you never paid attention. Because you signed whatever was put in front of you. Because you were so proud, so convinced of your own brilliance that you never questioned anything." Dennis was crying now, real tears. I watched them fall and felt nothing. "I want you to leave," I said. "I want you to find somewhere else to live. The divorce papers are with Helen. You'll be served tomorrow. Patricia, please." "Goodbye, Dennis." I walked inside and closed the door. Helen's forensic accountants worked fast. 3 days later, I had the answer. "It's Daniel," Helen said over the phone. "Victoria was telling the truth. The financial records on that USB drive, they're authentic. Daniel Webb stole over $2.3 million from Webb Technologies over a 3-year period. The money went to offshore accounts, shell companies, cryptocurrency purchases. And the toxicology report? Fabricated. Our experts compared it to the original from the medical examiner's office. Daniel altered the document. He added the digoxin levels himself." I sat down heavily. "So Marcus Webb died of natural causes?" "Yes. And Daniel has been running a campaign to frame Victoria for murder so he can contest the will and claim his inheritance." "What do we do?" "We go to the FBI. We give them everything. Daniel Webb is going to prison." I should have felt relieved. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. So tired. What about Victoria? What about her? She's carrying Marcus's child, the rightful heir to the Webb fortune, and she's been living in fear for 2 years because a man she thought was her partner's son has been trying to destroy her. Helen was quiet for a moment. "What are you thinking, Patricia?" "I'm thinking that I've spent my whole life being practical, being careful, being the person who cleans up other people's messes." I paused. Maybe it's time to do something different. The FBI arrested Daniel Webb on a Thursday morning. I watched the news coverage from my living room. The perp walk, the lawyer's statement, the shocked faces of people who had believed his story. Victoria called me that afternoon. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying. "I didn't do it for you. I know. But thank you anyway. There was a long pause. What happens now? Victoria asked. With what? With the company. With us. With, she hesitated. Everything. I don't know yet. Patricia, I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I want you to know. I'm going to resign. From Coleman Industries. From everything. I'll disappear. You'll never have to see me again. Where will you go? I don't know. Somewhere. Anywhere that isn't here. I thought about it. The woman who had walked into Bellini's in a red dress, confident and cruel. The woman who had planned to steal my husband and my company. The woman who had been living in terror because a dead man's son wanted to destroy her. Don't resign, I said. What? You're good at your job. The best CEO Coleman Industries has ever had. Better than Dennis, certainly. The healthcare technology expansion was your idea. The $4.2 billion market opportunity, that's real. I don't understand. I'm not offering forgiveness. I'm not offering friendship, but I am offering a second chance. I took a breath. Stay. Run the company. Do the job you were hired to do. And when that baby comes, Marcus's baby, raise it to be better than its parents. Victoria was silent for so long I thought she'd hung up. Why? She finally whispered. Because I'm 62 years old. Because I've spent my life building things. Because I'd rather see my company thrive than watch it crumble out of spite. I paused. And because that child deserves better than to be born into a war. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Another long pause. Yes. I hung up and sat in my garden. The roses were still blooming. The hydrangeas were still blue. The world kept turning, indifferent to the dramas of the people who lived in it. Dennis came by that weekend. He looked better, shaved, dressed in clean clothes, something like life returning to his eyes. I heard about Daniel Webb, he said. I heard you were the one who exposed him. Helen did most of the work. But you could have let Victoria take the fall. You could have let Daniel destroy her. After everything she did, she was still a human being, pregnant, alone, terrified. I shook my head. I've spent 32 years married to a man who never saw me clearly. I'm not going to become someone who can't see anyone else. Dennis was quiet for a moment. I signed the divorce papers, he said. I'm not going to contest anything. You were right. You built that company as much as I did. More, maybe. Thank you. I've been thinking about what you said. About not paying attention. About being too proud to question anything. He looked at the ground. You were right about that too. I usually am. He almost smiled. I know. We stood in silence. Two people who had shared 32 years and now shared nothing. What are you going to do? I asked. I don't know. Start over, I guess. Somewhere smaller. Simpler. He looked at me. What about you? I'm going to run my company. I'm going to watch my gardens grow. I'm going to be a grandmother to Brandon's children, if he ever has any. I paused. I'm going to live. Alone? For now. Maybe forever. Maybe not. I shrugged. I've spent my whole life taking care of other people. Maybe it's time to find out who I am on my own. Dennis nodded. You'll be good at it. Being on your own. I know. He turned to leave. At the edge of the driveway, he paused. Patricia? Yes? I really did love you. I know I didn't show it. I know I got lost along the way. But at the beginning, it was real. I thought about it. About the young man I'd married. About the years of building something together. About all the moments that had been genuine, even if they'd been buried under decades of disappointment. I know, I said. I loved you too. He walked away. I watched him until he turned the corner, until he was gone from sight. Then I went inside and made myself a cup of tea. The house was quiet. The light was golden. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. 1 year later, I stood in the delivery room at Charlotte Memorial Hospital, not as a patient, as a witness. Victoria Lawson gave birth to a baby girl at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Perfect. She has Marcus's eyes, Victoria said. exhausted but glowing. Look at her. I looked. The baby was wrinkled and red like all newborns, but her eyes were clear and blue, watching the world with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone so small. What are you going to name her? I asked. Margaret, after Marcus's assistant. The one who kept the records that saved me. Victoria looked up at me. And Ruth. Margaret Ruth Webb. I blinked. Ruth? Helen told me about your mother, about her name, about... Victoria hesitated. I know it's strange, but I wanted the name to mean something, to connect us, if that's okay. I thought about my mother, about the complicated love between parents and children, about the ways we carry the past into the future. It's okay, I said. The year had changed everything, and nothing. Daniel Webb was convicted on 17 counts of fraud, forgery, and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. His assets were seized, his law license revoked, his name erased from the Webb family legacy. Dennis moved to Asheville, a small house, a small life. We talked sometimes, not often, but enough. He was learning to garden. He was learning to cook. He was learning, slowly, to be alone. Brandon got married in June, a small ceremony at a vineyard in the mountains. I sat in the front row and cried happy tears. Dennis sat in the back and cried too, but we didn't speak. That part of our lives was over. Coleman Industries flourished. Victoria's healthcare technology initiative generated $800 million in revenue in its first year. The stock price tripled. Business magazines ran profiles calling her a visionary, a pioneer, a woman who had overcome personal tragedy to build an empire. They didn't know the whole story. No one did. I stepped back from the company. Not entirely. I still owned my 51%, still attended board meetings, still reviewed quarterly reports. But the day-to-day operations were Victoria's now. I had other things to do. I traveled. Paris in the spring, Tokyo in the fall. Places I'd always wanted to see but never had time for. I took cooking classes. I learned to paint. I joined a book club full of women my age who had also discovered, late in life, that there was more to existence than taking care of others. And I watched Margaret Ruth Webb grow. Victoria and I were not friends. We would never be friends. But we had something else. An understanding, a truce, a shared investment in a child who belonged to both of us and neither of us. I became Aunt Patricia, the woman who showed up with gifts on birthdays, the woman who babysat on weekends when Victoria had business trips, the woman who read bedtime stories about princesses and dragons and girls who saved themselves. Why do you do it? Helen asked me once. After everything Victoria did? I thought about the question. I'd thought about it many times. Because forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about yourself. It's about deciding what kind of life you want to live, what kind of person you want to be. And what kind of person do you want to be? Someone who builds things. Someone who makes things grow. Someone who leaves the world a little better than she found it. Helen smiled. That sounds like the Patricia I've always known. Maybe, or maybe it's the Patricia I'm finally becoming. The last time I saw Dennis was at Margaret's first birthday party. He wasn't invited, but he came anyway, standing at the edge of the yard, watching from a distance. I walked over to him. You shouldn't be here. I know. He looked at the child, at Victoria, at the life that was continuing without him. I wanted to see it, to understand what I gave up. Do you understand? I think so. I think I understand now that the life I wanted was never the life I had. I was always chasing something else, something more. And I missed what was right in front of me. What was right in front of you? He looked at me, really looked, maybe for the first time in years. You, the company, the family we built. All of it. He shook his head. I was a fool, Patricia. The biggest fool who ever lived. Yes, you were. He nodded, accepted it. Can I ask you something? What? Are you happy? I thought about the question, about my garden, about my travels, about my book club and my paintings and the little girl who called me Aunt Patricia. Yes, I said. I think I finally am. Good. He smiled. A real smile, sad but genuine. That's good. He walked away. I watched him go. Then I turned back to the party, to the life I had built, to the future I had chosen. Margaret toddled over to me, arms outstretched. I picked her up. "Aunt Pish," she said, her version of my name. "Hello, sweetheart." She put her hands on my face, looked at me with those clear blue eyes. "Story?" she asked. "Later. Right now, let's go see your mama." I carried her across the yard. Victoria was standing by the cake table talking to Helen, laughing at something. She looked up when she saw us coming. "There's my girl," Victoria said, reaching for Margaret. I handed the baby over. Our hands touched briefly. Just a moment, just a connection. "Thank you for coming," Victoria said. "I wouldn't miss it." We stood there, the three of us, surrounded by people and noise and celebration. A strange family, an impossible family, but a family nonetheless. I thought about the night at Bellini's, the red dress, the cruelty, the moment when everything fell apart, and I thought about now. The garden, the baby, the life I had built from the wreckage. Helen had asked me what kind of person I wanted to be. I hadn't known how to answer then, but I knew now. I wanted to be the kind of person who could take something broken and make it whole. The kind of person who could find forgiveness not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. The kind of person who could look at the worst of human nature and still choose to see the best. That was the woman I wanted to be. That was the woman I finally was.